Morning light spilled across the marble floors of Hartwell Financial Group, catching the glint of Victoria Hartwell's $1,000 heels as she strode through the lobby like a storm wrapped in silk. Everything about her presence was precision, the clipped rhythm of her steps, the controlled smile that made assistants straighten their backs, the subtle hush that followed her like respect disguised as fear. The world had taught her that perfection was power, and she wore both like armor. Then the camera of fate tilted, a faint smudge on the pristine marble broke the illusion. Bent over a mop was Ray Sullivan, a man who moved with the practiced invisibility of someone long used to being unseen. His hands were rough, his posture humble, his focus absolute. 3 years in this building had taught him when to vanish and when to nod. At home, an 8-year-old boy with asthma waited for him to pick him up after school. Here, in this world of glass and chrome, he was a ghost paid to erase imperfection. Victoria's phone buzzed, Tokyo negotiations, collapsing under her control. The day already tasted like defeat when her gaze caught the janitor's slow motion. That single smudge mocked her authority. "You missed a spot," she said, her tone sharp enough to slice. Ray nodded, shifted the mop, and murmured a polite apology. It should have ended there. But timing, that old conspirator, chose that moment to bring Caldwell and 2 executives bursting out of the stairwell, laughing about million-dollar deals. Victoria's irritation fused with ego. She gestured toward Ray, voice dripping with performative amusement. "Gentlemen, since our friend here clearly manages resources daily, perhaps he has advice on tough negotiations?" The executives chuckled, the laughter of people convinced of their own superiority. For a beat, Ray froze. His fingers tightened on the handle. Then he looked up, calm eyes meeting hers with disarming steadiness. "Don't confuse having money," he said quietly, with understanding its value. The lobby fell silent. Laughter died mid-breath. The echo of his words hung in the marble air, sharp and clean. Victoria's confident smile faltered, her reflection trembling slightly in the polished floor. For the first time in years, someone had looked straight through her armor and spoken truth without fear. Ray turned, bucket rattling softly, and walked toward the service corridor. He expected to lose his job, instead, he left behind a silence heavy enough to change a life. That night, the Empire slept, but Victoria Hartwell didn't. Her office windows reflected the city skyline like a kingdom she no longer trusted. The janitor's words replayed in her mind with surgical precision, "Don't confuse having money with understanding its value." It wasn't an insult. It was an X-ray, revealing everything hollow beneath her success. She opened her laptop, typing the name Ray Sullivan into the company database. The screen filled with numbers, years of service, perfect attendance, a single dependent, Danny Sullivan, age 8. The photograph attached, a man and his son smiling with the kind of quiet pride money can't buy, cracked something inside her. For the first time in her career, Victoria felt the one thing power had protected her from, shame. By morning, Ray walked through the same lobby as always, invisible again, or so he thought. His supervisor, Maggie, intercepted him with unusual softness. "Meeting at 9, conference room B," she said, eyes unreadable. The words landed like a sentence. As he rode the service elevator upward, each floor felt heavier. He'd seen how this went: you speak out, you disappear. Still, he straightened his frayed collar and walked in. Victoria sat alone at the head of the vast table. No audience, no cameras, just 2 people separated by worlds and a mop handle worth of history. She gestured to the chair opposite. "Sit." Her voice, usually metallic, carried a note of something rare, humanity. After a pause, she spoke, "I owe you an apology." The words sounded foreign, fragile. Ray blinked, unsure if it was a trap or a miracle. "You said something yesterday," she continued, "that's been echoing ever since. You were right, I've spent years chasing money and forgot its meaning." He stayed silent, wary, until she turned her screen toward him, his own finances spread out like an open wound. "You're paying 18% interest on debt you'll never escape." The system's broken, she said. But you seem to understand it better than anyone here. How? Ray hesitated, then smiled sadly. The library, he said. While my son's at soccer, I study the thing that keeps people like me stuck. His honesty disarmed her. For the first time, the Queen of Marble Floors looked at her janitor and saw a mind, not a uniform. Then maybe, she said slowly, you should be teaching us. She offered him something absurd, a seat at her executive meetings, 3 nights a week. Not charity, she promised. Perspective. Ray stared, half convinced he'd misheard. You want a janitor in your boardroom? No, she replied, eyes steady. I want the only person here who still remembers what value means. When he finally nodded, the deal felt heavier than any paycheck, a quiet revolution beginning under fluorescent lights. Outside, the morning sun slid across the same marble floor where arrogance had cracked 24 hours ago. The empire hadn't changed yet, but the ground beneath it had begun to tremble. The elevator doors opened to the executive floor, and Ray Sullivan stepped into a world built for power, not truth. The table gleamed like a mirror of judgment, surrounded by men in tailored confidence. Victoria sat at the head, poised but different, less armor, more awareness. The first meeting began with numbers, charts, and sterile talk of acceptable loss. Then she turned to him. Mr. Sullivan, thoughts? A single spotlight of silence fell across the room. Ray drew a slow breath. 15% looks harmless on paper, he said evenly, but to a family earning $50,000, it's the space between groceries and eviction. The room stiffened. One executive smirked, another shifted uncomfortably. But Victoria didn't interrupt. So what would you do? She asked. Ray leaned forward. Lower the rate for those who complete financial education training. Teach them how to succeed before we charge them for trying. The sentence landed like a quiet revolution. Caldwell's pen stopped mid-note, a long pause turned into reluctant nods. Fear began to give way to respect. Over the following weeks, the invisible man became the company's conscience. Ray's insights reshaped policies, reduced defaults, rebuilt loyalty. Victoria defended him in boardrooms that once mocked his name, while Danny sketched in the lounge nearby, soaking in the language of capital and compassion. In time, Victoria called him back into her office, sliding an envelope across the desk. Director of Client Impact and Financial Literacy, it read. Ray hesitated, why me? And she answered softly, because you see the cost behind every dollar sign. He accepted, not as charity but as mission. Soon the marble empire echoed with new sounds, laughter from community workshops, applause from clients who'd escaped debt, murmurs of gratitude from people who once feared their bankers. The company's profits climbed, but for the first time, so did its soul. Victoria Hartwell's empire was no longer built on intimidation, but on understanding, and the janitor who once cleaned her floor was now helping her rebuild its foundation. 5 years later, the Hartwell-Sullivan Foundation Gala shimmered under golden lights. The same marble that once echoed arrogance now carried laughter, stories, and hope. Guests in suits and families in modest clothes mingled freely, proof that the walls between them had thinned. At the podium stood Danny Sullivan, no longer the shy boy from the schoolyard but a confident 13-year-old with his father's quiet strength. My dad taught me money isn't power, he said, voice steady. Understanding it is. The room erupted in applause. Victoria Hartwell, standing beside Ray, smiled, a real smile, stripped of ego, filled with pride. As the celebration swirled around them, Victoria turned to him. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd stayed quiet that day? She asked softly. Ray's eyes followed his son across the crowd before meeting hers. I try not to, he said. This version of the world is enough. Their foundation had given thousands of families a second chance, microloans paired with education, dignity paired with opportunity. What began as an apology had become a movement. Later that night, Ray drove Danny home through the city they'd both helped change. Streetlights blurred across the windshield like falling stars. "Dad," Danny asked sleepily, "can anyone do what you did?" Ray smiled at the traffic light. "Maybe not anyone," he said, "but anyone who's ready. Luck finds the ones who prepare, learn, and speak even when they're afraid." The light turned green, and the car moved forward, quiet, steady, unstoppable. Across town, Victoria stood alone in her penthouse, looking out over the city that no longer felt like hers to rule but hers to serve. She thought of the janitor, the floor, the lesson that rewrote her empire. Down below, in that same lobby, a new night shift worker pushed a mop across the marble. Victoria walked past him on her way out, this time pausing, offering a nod. It was small, but it meant everything. Because this time, the system was listening. The world had shifted, not with a revolution, but with a conversation. One truth spoken by a man nobody saw, and one woman brave enough to hear it.